What does it feel like to look at a rusty, padlock-sealed storage container in the deepest sector of an abandoned basement, expecting to clear out useless structural debris, only to slice open a hidden, unallocated sack and find the exact generational gold assets that vanished from your childhood home 20 years ago? It doesn't begin with an emotional, theatrical scream of shock. It begins with the cold, physical silence of vintage velvet boxes scraping against concrete, and the freezing, absolute realization that the entire narrative of your youth was a carefully engineered family fraud. The monster who had dismantled your home's sanctuary and pinned the crime onto your loyal elderly nanny wasn't a phantom thief from the city corridor. It was the very aunt who sat at your mother's dinner table every Sunday evening. I didn't lose my balance, I didn't drop my tools, and I didn't alert the extended family network through a frantic phone call. I simply photographed the unvarnished serial numbers, cross-referenced the hallmarks against the original 2006 police files, and initiated a quiet, systematic execution of corporate and social excommunication that would leave my aunt completely isolated and return every single dime of that stolen wealth to the nanny's surviving children as a compliance liquidation. Let me show you how a precise, detail-oriented woman can turn a forgotten basement's container into a public execution chamber for an ancestral traitor without ever raising her pitch or altering her posture. My name is Clara. I am 33 years old. If you saw me managing the corporate risk compliance data and generational asset portfolios behind the dual monitors at a prominent wealth consultancy firm in the historic district of Charleston, South Carolina, you would see a highly precise, completely methodical woman. I have striking, rich raven black hair that I keep styled in a clean, elegant shoulder-length cut, deep amber brown eyes that have spent a decade auditing complex banking system anomalies, and a life measured entirely by the unyielding laws of data verification and structural documentation. I didn't inhabit a disorganized world where things happened by accident or emotional impulse. My life was built on an absolute, simple devotion and a rigid lifestyle pattern that I believed was completely secure. I managed the household accounts, monitored our network firewalls, and organized our investments with the exact same mathematical precision I used to protect corporate clients from internal fraud. I believed that this transparent routine was a total shield against the world. To our professional and social circle, the Vance family lineage was the absolute benchmark of Southern stability, deeply aligned modern partnership, and ancestral prestige. We didn't have separate financial silos or unresolved domestic friction, but our entire generational history was permanently haunted by a dark structural anomaly that occurred when I was just 13 years old. A massive, high-value heist had targeted our family estate, wiping out my mother's entire collection of certified antique jewelry, diamond tiaras, and ancestral gold bars, assets valued at over $400,000 that constituted her biological legacy. I grew up inside the cold shadow of that loss, completely unaware that the safety protocols I designed as an adult were about to map out the complete destruction of my innocence. The primary suspect in that historical file had always been Nanny Martha. Martha was a loyal, quiet, elderly woman who had served our household for 15 years, managing our rooms, preparing our family dinners, and guarding my childhood perimeter with an absolute maternal devotion. She was broad-shouldered with a wrinkled, kind face and a soft laugh that made her highly popular among the children in our sector. She possessed physical keys to the property under the strict administrative agreement that she would secure the vault room whenever my parents traveled out of state for corporate asset reviews. When the police detectives processed the crime scene in the winter of 2006, they found no signs of forced structural entry at the windows or the perimeter doors. The security system had been systematically deactivated using the primary staff override code, a security parameter that only Martha was supposed to hold during our travel windows. My maternal aunt Eleanor was the person who stepped forward as the primary witness, confidently testifying to the investigators that she had observed Martha spending hours near the safety vault on the night of the liquidation. I trusted that sharp, professional family testimony implicitly. Martha wept openly in our entryway, her hands trembling as she swore on her life that she had never touched the family ledger or the vault codes, but the lack of an alternative data trail left her entirely unprotected. My parents terminated her contract immediately, without a severance package, filing a public criminal report that permanently blacklisted her name across the entire state network. She was cast out into the vacuum of poverty, her reputation completely liquidated, while her 3 young children were forced to exit the school district in absolute shame. I grew up believing that an ordinary, trusted employee had executed a cynical theft against my mother, entirely blind to the underlying fraud. The secondary component in this historical matrix was my maternal aunt, Eleanor. Eleanor was 55, a sleek, calculating woman who managed the digital marketing accounts and decorative acquisitions for our extended family's local commercial real estate investments. She was my mother's older sibling, the woman who had grown up in the neighboring estate, shared our ancestral milestones, and sat at the head of our family board meetings. She managed her life with a superficial, overly attentive sweetness directed toward our wealthy relatives, positioning herself as the ultimate guardian of the family name. Because our firm required continuous coordination during the current summer development cycle, Eleanor had requested my administrative assistance to clear out her old historic residential property in the coastal sector, a massive colonial estate that she had decided to liquidate to balance her boutique company's credit sheets. She handed me the physical master keys to the property, under the agreement that I would conduct a thorough compliance audit of the storage structures and clear out any remaining family records before the commercial developers took possession of the deed. I viewed her as a biological extension of my own identity, a pillar of our social standing. I remember sitting on her veranda during the previous spring gala, watching Eleanor talk with our corporate developers near the outdoor fireplace, and feeling a deep sense of psychological peace. I had no idea that while she was accepting my financial consulting and utilizing my resources to balance her business sheets, she was actively utilizing my professional focus to camouflage a 20-year-old domestic treason. She believed that the absolute depth of my lifelong trust in her was a permanent psychological blind spot that would prevent me from ever verifying the unallocated sectors of her basement. Trust inside an extended family network is often the most dangerous vulnerability, because we assume that shared bloodlines and ancestral honor create a permanent moral boundary against malice. When you treat a relative like a biological protector, your brain automatically categorizes their testimony as safe, leaving you entirely unprotected against a systematic deception. Have you ever realized that the relative who organized your family events was utilizing that exact intimacy to hide a criminal theft right under your nose? Tell me your experience below. The physical breakdown of her camouflage initialized at precisely 1:15 p.m. on a scorching Tuesday afternoon. I had been working inside Eleanor's historic coastal estate since 8 a.m., managing the systematic removal of old corporate files and cataloging the physical assets left in the upper drawing rooms. The house was empty, the quiet of the coastal afternoon rendered absolute by the thick brick walls of the colonial structure. I descended the wooden stairs into the subterranean basement level to verify the final storage sectors before the moving crew arrived. The basement was a massive, damp space filled with structural beams, old real estate displays, and forgotten furniture from the previous century. I walked toward the rear corridor, my flashlight tracing the walls, when my eyes stopped on an old, heavy iron cage door that was secured with a rusty, vintage deadbolt. The lock didn't align with the standard keys Eleanor had provided, indicating a hidden, unallocated perimeter. I utilized a heavy crowbar from my engineering kit, applied mechanical leverage, and snapped the internal pins of the old lock. The iron door groaned open with a high-pitched metallic shriek that echoed through the empty foundation. Inside the small enclosure sat an old wooden storage bench covered in layers of gray dust and decayed canvas bags. I walked into the cell, my amber-brown eyes scanning the floorboards. Resting in the center of the bench was a large, tightly tied cloth flour sack, an ordinary, rustic object that seemed completely out of place inside a secure iron cage. I reached down, my hands catching the rough fabric, and noticed that the knot was reinforced with an old lead security seal wire used by commercial transport companies in the early 2000s. I pulled out my pocket knife, sliced through the ancient wire seal, and dumped the contents of the cloth sack directly onto the clean surface of my folding work table. The unallocated container did not hold antique textiles or kitchen remnants. It rendered a catastrophic historical mismatch across the table. Resting inside the cloth interior were 6 heavy, dark velvet jewelry boxes, their gold borders showing the distinct crest of my mother's ancestral lineage. I opened the primary box, and my breath remained completely flat as the high-intensity flashlight illuminated a massive, brilliant platinum tiara encrusted with brilliant-cut diamonds and deep blue sapphires, the exact flagship asset listed on page 4 of the 2006 Charleston police theft report. A life spent auditing financial fraud teaches you that a single piece of raw data can destroy an entire architecture of lies in the span of 30 seconds. I didn't panic, I didn't scream, and I didn't call my mother to weep over the discovery. I pulled out my smartphone, opened my encrypted compliance database, and downloaded the original scanned PDF copy of the 2006 insurance and police liquidation logs that I had maintained on our family server. I spent 2 hours performing a rigorous manual forensic verification of every single item inside that cloth sack. I uncovered 12 solid gold bullion bars bearing the exact sequential serial numbers registered by my grandfather's estate, 7 diamond-encrusted tennis bracelets, and a custom-engraved signet ring bearing my mother's personal initials on the inner band. But the final verification token was resting at the bottom of the sack. It was a handwritten personal inventory note, penned in Eleanor's distinctive elegant cursive style, dated November 12, 2006, exactly 3 days before the heist was initialized at our estate. The note detailed the exact estimated liquidation value of each piece on the international private market and a checklist for deactivating the main house alarm override code. The data was complete, precise, and absolute. The loyal nanny, Martha, had never touched the vault codes. My own aunt had systematically deactivated the security perimeters, siphoned the ancestral assets into her private basement cage, and manufactured a cold-blooded public perjury to destroy an innocent woman's life while positioning herself as a supportive sibling during my mother's grief. They believed that the passage of 20 years and the absolute finality of the police report had permanently secured their camouflage. I didn't lose my balance. I didn't confront Eleanor at her boutique office, and I didn't drop a single item back into the sack. I held my device steady, captured high-resolution macro photographs of every single asset, the handwritten coordination note, and the serial numbers, synchronizing the files directly to our firm's secure legal cloud backup under a permanent encryption protocol. I placed the entire collection of gold and diamonds into my secure corporate transport case, locked the iron cage door, and walked out of the colonial estate into the blinding South Carolina sun. The transaction was closed. The liquidation of Eleanor's existence had officially initialized. I spent the next 48 hours executing an aggressive, silent financial and legal insulation strategy that would turn our upcoming family lineage meeting into a total public execution room. I didn't contact our relatives, and I didn't file a standard police report that could allow Eleanor to hire a corporate defense attorney to suppress the evidence. Utilizing my administrative credentials as the primary manager of our family's real estate consulting trust, I downloaded every single banking ledger, every tax filing, and every asset deed we had synchronized over a decade. I discovered that Eleanor had recently used her projected shares in the upcoming estate liquidation as the primary collateral to secure a multi-million-dollar commercial expansion loan for her boutique design company downtown, listing our joint family trust as the secondary guarantor without the explicit verification of the family board. I compiled the recovered 2006 photographs, the certified serial number matches, the handwritten coordination note, and the unauthorized loan transfers into a comprehensive civil fraud and lineage expulsion brief. I forwarded the entire package directly to the senior managing partners of our family's private legal firm and the presiding executive members of our traditional family council. The extraordinary board meeting was called for Thursday afternoon, disguised as a routine synchronization session to finalize the liquidation deeds for Eleanor's colonial estate. They believed it was a standard financial signing, entirely oblivious to the fact that the state compliance brief was already sitting in my hand. The corporate boardroom of our family fund was illuminated by the sharp white glare of the designer light panels overhead. The polished mahogany table was clean, reflecting the skyscrapers of downtown Charleston through the panoramic glass windows. The 10 primary family stakeholders, uncles and cousins, turned their heads simultaneously as the double glass doors swung open at 2 p.m. sharp. I walked into the executive space with a slow, unhurried precision that instantly killed the ambient hum of the building's climate control system. I wasn't wearing an office suit or a rigid corporate uniform. I walked through the doors wearing an exceptionally beautiful, gorgeous deep plum silk midi sundress with a delicate flowing skirt and an elegant neckline that caught the track lighting beautifully. It was a stunning, sophisticated dress designed for a high-end social setting, making me look radiant, effortlessly beautiful, and completely independent. My rich raven black hair fell in soft, natural waves down my shoulders, and my amber brown eyes held a terrifying, razor-sharp clarity. But the most striking transformation was not the plum silk dress. It was the expression on my face. My lips were turned upward into a powerful, quiet, slight smile of absolute victory. A calm, knowing Zafir Tebessumi that held no anger, no malice, and no remaining sorrow. It was the smile of an expert auditor who had tracked the historical anomaly, executed the protocol, and won every single piece of the board. Aunt Eleanor was sitting at the center of the mahogany table, a smooth, confident smile on her face, holding an expensive gold pen, ready to sign the real estate transfer documents that would grant her millions in liquid capital from the family fund. "Clara, sweetie, you're late," Eleanor said, her voice dripping with a smooth, patronizing warmth as her eyes scanned my plum dress. We are ready to finalize the deeds for the coastal property. Why are you holding those heavy black folders? The deeds are permanently frozen, Eleanor, I said, my voice perfectly flat, carrying a cold, resonant echo that froze the room instantly. I'm here to deliver the final audit on the 2006 structural heist. Your operational contract with this family has just been permanently liquidated. I lifted my arm, opened the heavy folder, and dropped the high-resolution prints of the recovered ancestral gold bars, the diamond's tiara, and her handwritten 2006 coordination note directly onto the center of the wood table, sliding the data sheets until they brushed against her gold pen. Eleanor's smooth, corporate smile completely vanished. Her knuckles turned an absolute chalky white against her folder, a sudden primal terror flashing across her face as her eyes decoded the unvarnished images of her own handwriting and the stolen family assets retrieved from her basement cage. She tried to stand up from her leather chair, but her hands were trembling so violently she dropped her glasses, the lenses clicking sharply against the polished wood. "Clara, what is this nonsense? Where did you get these pictures?" Eleanor stammered, her voice cracking violently as she lost her superficial designer poise. "This was an old burglary case. The nanny took those items 20 years ago. You have no legal rights to forge documents against your own family blood." "The blood was betrayed the moment you converted our mother's legacy into a personal cash option and cast a loyal woman into poverty to camouflage your corporate debts," I replied, my amber-brown eyes locked onto her twitching eyelid. "You spent 20 years laughing at our data logs while hiding the assets 3 miles away. The system has just output your reality." The boardroom turned into a freezing, breathless vacuum. My mother began to weep openly into her hands, her proud facade completely shattered by the realization that her own sister had executed the heist that had haunted her adulthood. My father stood up from his chair, his face dark with an absolute ancestral rage, as he read the certified serial number validation sheets provided by the compliance attorneys. "Eleanor," my father said, his voice carrying the flat, unyielding authority of the family fund's bylaws, "you are under immediate corporate suspension. Your shares in this consulting trust are permanently forfeited to cover the historical civil damages, and your name is hereby erased from every asset deed in this state. You have exactly 60 seconds to exit this floor before the security detail removes your presence physically." The total liquidation of Eleanor's social and financial existence was executed within 48 hours of that boardroom meeting. She was completely excommunicated from the Lineage network. Her names were deleted from our family trust records. Her entry codes to our properties were deactivated, and every single commercial asset attached to her boutique design company was frozen under an immediate court-ordered civil fraud injunction. She was left completely penniless, her reputation across the entire Southern real estate network entirely flattened by the data string retrieved from her own basement cage. But the true audit required a secondary moral resolution. Utilizing our firm's private database locators, I spent the following week tracking down the descendants of Nanny Martha. Martha had tragically passed away in poverty 10 years prior, but her 3 children were living in a cramped industrial district outside the state line, working manual shifts to survive the economic fallout of their mother's public blacklisting. I flew out to their district, walked into their modest community office, and placed the secure asset transfer deeds directly into their hands. I didn't deliver an emotional speech or a theatrical apology. I simply handed them the full $400,000 in recovered gold assets, accompanied by a certified copy of the court-ordered lineage exoneration document that permanently restored their mother's name to a status of absolute honor. Your mother was an innocent operator inside a corrupt system, I told them, my voice perfectly level, my powerful victory smile offering them a quiet, unshakable peace. The fraud has been permanently cleared from the ledger. The capital is yours. The true resolution materialized not in a courtroom, but on the sun-drenched terrace of my new penthouse apartment overlooking the historic waterfront square. It was a bright, pristine morning, the cool breeze moving the curtains of the open deck. I was sitting in an outdoor lounge chair, drinking an iced green tea, reviewing our department's quarterly global compliance expansions on my tablet, completely at peace. My personal device buzzed with an incoming encrypted notification from an unlisted international domain. It was an email from Eleanor, operating from a cramped rental space outside the county line. Clara, the text read, the syntax thin, cracked, and completely stripped of her former executive elegance. My own siblings won't even look at me at Christmas, and because of the criminal fraud listing from the board, I can't get a commercial design loan anywhere in this state. The bank took the vehicles, and the colonial estate is gone. You completely erased your own aunt's life. Was it really worth destroying an entire family just for a forgotten cloth sack in an old basement cage? I leaned back against the plush cushions of my lounge chair, looking out at the glittering landscape, my powerful victory smile deepening as I placed my fingers onto the digital screen to close the file forever. I didn't finish your life, Eleanor, I typed back, my fingers moving with the flat, unhurried precision of a tactical system report. I simply allowed the commercial system to output the exact reality of the data you chose to enter into that basement cage in 2006. You chose to sign a digital contract of your own betrayal, while a loyal woman carried your blame. Enjoy the final compilation of your choices. I hit send, deleted the string from the server cache, and permanently blocked the domain. She remains inside her self-built cage, her name just an erased entry in my future compliance logs. The past is a secured perimeter, and my home finally stands on its own unshakable foundation. Do you know why I am telling you this story from the edge of this open terrace today? Because the predators and deceivers of this world want you to believe that if you are a regular, structured person who focuses on your data and trusts your family, you are too weak to defend your own life. They think because you are quiet, because you ignore their small slights while coordinating their family assets, you must be blind to their large conspiracies. They believe a gaslighted heart will always collapse into useless tears. But they do not understand the absolute, unalterable laws of patience and documentation. Your life does not belong to the people who try to manipulate your absence using your own bloodline. And you don't need a loud screaming match, a public scene, or a chaotic confrontation to execute absolute justice. You just need the cold, silent discipline to collect the data, secure the evidence, and wait for the exact moment to let their own greed pull the trigger on their existence. Eleanor thought she could steal my mother's legacy because I was a quiet child behind a vault door. She forgot the most basic rule of the system backups. The woman who manages the files always knows exactly how to liquidate the assets. I am Clara. The audit is finalized. The asset is secured, and my path finally stands on its own unshakable foundation. Now, I have a final question for you, the person listening to my voice in the quiet of your own room tonight. If you discovered your own aunt had executed a high-value heist against your mother and pinned the crime onto your loyal nanny, would you lose your temper and scream at her in the living room, or would you wait patiently for a forensic estate audit to freeze her entire corporate asset structure and watch her get removed by investigators in front of her own board partners? Tell me your strategy in the comments below. I am analyzing your logic.